Hey Bert, I have a Lagunitas? It's a cappuccino stout. Like, ice cold. That's pretty good. Bert uploaded a video a while back, The Contingent God and the Necessary Universe. I encourage the viewer to watch that video before continuing for the sake of context and charity. Bert does a fabulous job making his arguments clear-cut for the less philosophically enthusiastic. In this video, I aim to defend Reformed theology and challenge Bert's theory of modality. In fact, the coherence of his worldview in total. 2 points, which I will unpack. Point number 1, Bert's contingent God argument, hereafter CGA, is a straw man. Point number 2, Bert's argument betrays intellectual commitments to an incoherent worldview. Toward the former point, CGA is an internal critique, an attempted reductio ad absurdum. That means the validity of CGA depends on accurately representing the view in question. However, CGA neglects the Reformed doctrine of incomprehensibility. This occurs on 2 levels. First, there is an equivocation on Bert's part between the concept of necessity and that of aseity, self-existence.
Who are you? I am that I am.
Secondly, and the more fundamental layer of error, Bert falsely assumes a univocal concept or principle of modality.
We're not here because we're free. We're here because we're not free. There's no escaping reason, no denying purpose.
Let's unpack these. Bert's argument assumes the nature of necessity is a single universal concept or law, according to which everything in Christian ontology, both creation and creator, are defined. In other words, calling something necessary attributes the same modal property, whether pertaining to God, human beings, or Playdoh. In effect, Bert is assuming that when we say it is necessarily the case that all squares have 4 sides, and when we say it is necessarily the case that God exists, the word necessarily refers to the same state of affairs, or it's being applied in the same way at least. Bert uses the analogy of shaped Play-Doh and Play-Doh crunchers. The important part is that in his video, shapes and their relations precede whatever Play-Doh cruncher you use, making the Play-Doh cruncher and the end shape equally subject to a preceding law of Play-Doh crunching shape. But for Reformed Christianity, God is ase, or self-existent. Put another way,
He is the fullness of all being. He is the fullness of existence. As God is unchanging, is necessarily as he is. God is the totality of existence prior to acting.
Yes, exactly. God's nature precedes that of the created realm. God's modality then precedes, undergirds, and determines whatever true notions of modality we have as creatures. Whatever shape the capitalized Play-Doh cruncher has, it precedes the very concepts of Play-Doh, Play-Doh crunching, and even the entailment relation between crunching Play-Doh and resulting shape. God is necessary, not because modality demands his existence, but because he exists independent of anything beside himself, including modality as we know it. Let's recap. The soundness of CJ stands or falls on whether it represents Reformed Christian theism accurately. It does not. It misrepresents Reformed Christian theism, insofar as it conflates necessity, like that of the created order, with God's self-existence, which precedes said created order.
Nuanced points out of context, to ignore crucial information, to even exaggerate claims to the point of absurdity, which is then easier to refute. These are all straw man tactics. It's not even always intentional. You might accidentally construct a straw man if you don't fully understand the depth of an argument.
Furthermore, and more fundamentally, CGA misrepresents Reformed Christian theism on account that it assumes an abstract reality which contextualizes, let's say, God's existence. Shapeliness, the concept of Play-Doh crunching, and their relations all precede and contextualize or make intelligible the supposed first moving Play-Doh cruncher. I don't know. Bert's analogy, not mine. It's a good analogy for a deist god, I guess.
He's engaging in reductio ad absurdum. It's the logical fallacy of extending someone's argument to ridiculous proportions and then criticizing the result, and I do not appreciate it.
CGA assumes God's necessity is the same as man's necessity, as well as that there is ultimate reality behind and upholding God, when in fact only the triune God, the changeless one, is ultimate. He precedes all else, including our human notions of possibility and necessity. Thus, CGA has failed to refute Reformed theology, though it's a great problem for, say, Bert's worldview, and we'll get to that in a second. Really quick, I want to anticipate something. How to relate God to the created order without violating his absolute ontic precedence and divine incomprehensibility is a matter for another video. Nevertheless, to give a preview, I'll offer the Jadlau conversation. I still don't know how to pronounce that. Is it Jadlow or Jadlau? Whatever. I'll offer advice in using the phrase language mediated through revelation rather than analogical language. Beginning where I left off. Besides the fact that a univocal concept or principle of modality is not a fair representation of my theology, neither does it turn out to be a coherent idea in the first place. The modal collapse invoked as the gravitas of CGA is, in fact, the difficulty faced on non-reformed Christianity. We merely ask whether ultimate reality, for Bert, is necessary or contingent. Since the entire scope of knowable reality is contextualized by a single universal concept or law of modality, an answer can only be given one way or the other, on pain of resort to nuclear mysticism, where the universe in its ultimate state is simply unknowable. Let's suppose we take the first one. If ultimate reality is necessary, then there is no such thing as contingency, as CGA already made clear. The distinction is malformed for the very reason lodged by CGA, but the same is true of a basically contingent reality. If reality is ultimately contingent, then any so-called necessity will be subject to this ultimate contingency. Again, removing the distinction. On either horn, modal distinctions become unintelligible, because the universe just is, sans any necessity to distinguish contingency, or any contingency to distinguish necessity. Put another way, on your theory of modality, Bert, modality is not even a truth-functional notion. It's an utterance without meaning. Propositions about modality are neither true nor false, and they can't be, because there's no ontological room to distinguish them by. One could say, as I will here, to distinguish necessity from contingency presupposes the sovereign Lord over both, his plan and revelation, Jesus, the Son of God. In conclusion, and speaking in the broadest terms, the issue the unbelieving worldview faces is to demonstrate the possibility of rationality apart from invoking Christian theism. But at the point where your worldview revokes any speech about possibility itself, it has thereby removed its own ability to proclaim emancipation from a necessarily Christian universe. This challenge extended in love. I hope you change your mind.
When God says I am, think self-existent. He needs no help, cause listen, he's self-sufficient. The only autonomous being in the universe. No food or thirst, and everything is truly first. And actually, he's not in the universe, he's beyond the universe. It's his space and time to disperse. Go back as far as you could possibly go. Before the Big Bang, the I am was stopping the show. Yo, and man-made visuals could never display the mystical nature of the physical, created from the invisible. You might need to get checked in the Bellevue if you think that if God was hungry, he would tell you. You take aim at his range, you have to go. He remains the same and he doesn't change like the status quo. John 8:24, hear the God man saying you will die in your sin if you don't believe I am.